Everybody. This is Mike Makovsky. I'm the president CEO of JINSA. We have half of the IDF with us today to discuss recent events. Now, this is we put out all of JINSA's Israeli military assets at your disposal to talk about obviously what's been going on, to discuss. We do a weekly for those new to this. Obviously, we've been doing weekly webinars since the war began, but obviously the news this week has been especially interesting on the ceasefire. And before we delve in, I want to talk about the ceasefire agreement, elements of it, whether the pluses and minuses, what was behind it, and so on. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce everyone. And then I'll just talk about what's just happened in the last couple of days leading up to the ceasefire, and then we'll delve into the ceasefire. But just going on my screen, left to right, we have JINSA Distinguished Fellow General Amikam Norkin. He's the previous commander of the Israeli Air Force. We have General Yaakov Ayish, the Josephson, Senior Vice President for Israeli Affairs, and he's the former head of IDF operations, among other things. We have IDF Brigadier General Effie Defrin, who is a visiting IDF fellow with JINSA. His last position is as he was the head of the IDF's International Cooperation Division, and he was just in Washington the last few months and just went back to Israel, I think, last week. And of course, we also have retired General Yaakov Amidror, another JINSA Distinguished Fellow, among other things, former National Security Advisor to Bibi Netanyahu. I'm going to start with our lone Air Force man here, General Norkin. Before we get into, as things were, it was clear that the ceasefire was going to start, and it started, I believe, at 4 a.m. local time. There was a lot of Air Force activity going on in Lebanon. I believe I read, for instance, something like 20 targets were hit in the Beirut area in 2 minutes, for example. I'd like, actually, before again, if you could just talk about just what Israel was doing just in the last few days leading up to the ceasefire. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. As you know, the Air Force acted in Lebanon in the last few weeks, especially in the main areas of Beirut, Baalbek, Sor, and Sidon, and of course support the ground forces at the south part of Lebanon. Till the beginning of this war, we attacked more than 200 targets inside the capital city, Beirut. So, and in the last 24 hours, as you mentioned, more than 20. But we took the last 12 hours, especially last night before the ceasefire started, and we, let's say, find all the targets where the Hezbollah tried to develop and produce missiles, the storage, the headquarters, what just left from the targets. But the most important thing is that we attacked a quite unique infrastructure, which we understand that the Hezbollah tried to build a production line for a chemical weapon. So I think that after this air campaign, we destroyed what they built, and we estimate that we killed more than 100 Hezbollah terrorists. So it was a quite intensive night for us in Israel before the ceasefire.
Well, you, General Norkin, we've obviously spoken about this offline, and I think there was some view among certainly senior IDF generals that Israel had really hit a lot of the targets it needed to early on. I know you and I spoken. I mean, the obviously going back to when all this began in late September, Israel really destroyed. And we'll talk about it. I'd like to ask you, roughly what percentage of the rockets and missiles that Hezbollah has hit. So are you surprised that at this late date there were so many targets hit? Is this reflecting maybe new intelligence that was unearthed in recent days?
Well, first of all, as we all saw, we understand that they cannot launch more than one or two rocket or missiles per day to the center of Israel. Most of the rockets that they launch it to the north part of Israel. So we achieved a quite nice achievement once we destroyed most of the capacity of the medium and long range rockets of Hezbollah. But once the IDF is flying above Lebanon and the ground forces act there and the intelligence focus on Lebanon, so there is on process intelligence that push up more and more targets. So some of the targets were pre-planned, and some of them they are real-time targets. So altogether, it's become to more than 200 targets in the last 12 hours.
Wow. And what percentage, and we know there's different range of rockets and missiles, and you mentioned the limitations on hitting more central targets in Israel, but if you had to put a percentage about the arsenal of Hezbollah that the Air Force the Air Force and some of the ground forces have destroyed, what would you say it is right now?
Well, I think it's around 70 to 80%. And just to compare, I think that the effect that the Air Force and the IDF have over Hezbollah is much higher than the Second Lebanon War. Much higher. We killed most of the command chain, and we destroy much more targets. And the targets, the quality of the targets, there are much more important targets for this terror organization. So I think that Israel, at the military level, achieved a very nice achievement, and the goal to bring back all the citizens back to their home. I think that the military achieved what the government aimed.
Okay. And by the way, I'll just add, you were Air Force commander till I think April of 2022. Is that right? And you were Air Force, and I remember you talking, you were planning, and perhaps your predecessor, General Eshel, and so on, you guys have been working on this, planning for this war for years. And it seems like the execution has been, certainly by the Air Force, has been outstanding, really, here in Lebanon. And I think it's obviously changed the whole balance in the region. I mean,
now this is a very good let's say the time and the parameter. They are ready for the a political campaign with our neighbors, the Sunni nations, the United States, other nations, to take those military achievement, and to maybe to have a better situation in the Middle East generally, and especially in Lebanon.
All right, let's get into the ceasefire now, and I'm going to go down on my screen, at least counterclockwise. I'm going to go to Effie, to General Defrin. first, and then General Amidror and General Ayish. Could you explain, Effie, what and I may say to everyone, I think like all of you, perhaps you fought in Lebanon, you fought in the 2006 Lebanon War, you were severely wounded there. You obviously know it well. Do you, what are the terms, what are the most important terms of this ceasefire? Let's just talk about the facts first, and then we'll start talking about why Israel
Right.
did other things like that.
First, thank you. Thank you for having me in this prestigious panel. Second, I would say that more important than the fact that I was commander, I was commanding a battalion in the Second Lebanon War and I was injured, I led in the last 5 years the tripartite mechanism, which means I led the discussions with Lebanon regarding implementing 1701 and following from very close the entire last period of time in which Hezbollah, entrenched into South Lebanon and built all this capacity. So I'm a kind of expert on the matter. Now, going to the recent agreement with Lebanon, in general, first thing is we have 60 days to allow the LAF, the Lebanese Armed Forces, to deploy in South Lebanon. We're talking about numbers-wise, talking about 5,000 soldiers. Mainly, they're what they call their special forces forge. It's a good level soldiers who were trained by the Brits in the last few years. They were deployed different areas in South Lebanon. So now they are going to go down south with other forces. It's not a professional military that we can count off, but it's part of the solution. And in those 60 days, the IDF gradually will withdraw from South Lebanon and go back south of the blue line. This is the first thing. Second thing is,
if I could jump
please,
in
Mike.
1 second. Sorry, Effie. I want to just say I was on a Zoom today with Amos Hochstein. He gave a thing to Jewish leaders, and he made it clear, he says there's misinformation. People are talking about 60-day ceasefire, and I know you didn't say this, but I want to clarify for the audience. He said this is a permanent ceasefire. It just, as you point out, I just want to emphasize, obviously, if it's observed, the permanent ceasefire.
Exactly.
But that it's 60 days. There'll be different stages of Israeli withdrawals, but by 60 days, Israeli forces are supposed to withdraw from southern Lebanon. Is that right?
Okay. Exactly. As you said, exactly as you said. And I will refer to that when I will, in the last point, and I will come to that. Why is it 60 days and what is expected later than that? Second thing is simply implementing 1701 in general is no arms in South Lebanon, south of the Litani River, no armed personnel, no Hezbollah, no armed personnel beside those of the official government of Lebanon, which mean LAF and UNIFIL, and that's it. Police, but officials of the Lebanese government, mainly not Hezbollah and not other proxies. By the way, you have their Islamic Jihad, you have elements of Hamas in South Lebanon, and so on and so forth. It's all under the responsibility of the government of Lebanon now. Let's see how it turns out. And more elements that Israel is insisting now on implementing, like everybody's mentioning South Lebanon, but now there is insistence of the Lebanese armed forces deployment on the border crossings between Lebanon and Syria, also on the seaports, on naval ports, and of course in the airport in Beirut and others, making sure they are not controlled by other elements like Hezbollah and so on, like it's been done until recently, until our Air Force made sure they are not there anymore. And they are still there, so taking responsibility of the border crossing, mainly as far as we're concerned, is preventing arms smugglings to the extent it was recently. We saw all the results of that. So demilitarization of Lebanon is also part of 1701 and border crossings. Now, three different things that are new now. First is, as I mentioned, the border crossing, the seaports and the airports. The second thing is the International Committee. Actually, it was an Israeli idea a year ago, international, it's a little bit absurd because we have to have an international committee that will observe the international forces, which mean UNIFIL, making or implementing the mandate. They were there, they are deployed in South Lebanon in the first place. We insisted on this committee. It will include the Americans. They will lead this committee together with other nationalities like the French and the Germans and the Brits, and maybe some Arab countries as well, like UAE, maybe Saudi in the future. But it will be a kind of mechanism that will inspect and that will make sure that that UNIFIL and LAF are implementing 1701 properly, and Israel IDF will have an address to approach if something goes wrong before attacking, before a kinetic solution. And the third thing is the freedom of action. That's, I think, something that Israel insisted on from day one since we started negotiating this thing, that we will have the freedom to act if this mechanism won't work. We cannot afford going back to the situation as it was on October 8th.
Yeah, let me ask about that, because I think there's some question. How long does Israel have to wait? So let's say they perceive an infraction, let's say by Hezbollah, troops there that aren't supposed to be, obviously, or they conducting things they're not supposed to. Is Israel able to act right away? They have to go to this body first, and then there's a period of time they wait. Or do you know what does that practically involve, I guess, for Israel to enforce?
Mike, from what I know, it's not in general, it's not a blur, there are no gray zones here. There are always, certain scenarios. Not everything is written on the paper, but this time they made sure they had some kind of a list of scenarios in which Israel will be allowed to attack. Israel take the freedom to attack whenever it wants to. Of course, they will have to take first complain to this committee and make sure that things happen. The timetable here is not, precise, but there is an understanding of Israel right to act if things goes wrong.
And okay, before I turn to General Amidror, I want to go back to General Norkin for 1 second. If they're like Hezbollah troops that go into the zone, they're not supposed to be south of Litani, is this something that the Air Force is able to enforce generally? I mean, I understand each situation is different, but is this something that, or would it require ground forces generally for Israel to enforce any infraction?
First of all, today, 4 Hezbollah terrorists tried to get into the near to the border, and immediately the ground forces arrested them. So once the ground forces they are there, this is one of their missions. Let's say after the 60 days, if there will be some information about vehicles or groups that are driving to the south, of course, the Air Force can support this mission. But I think that mainly the North Command with the ground forces around the border, with the support of the Air Force, this might be the main mission for the next couple of weeks.
Okay. All right, let me turn to General Amidror. If you're able to turn on your camera again, if you're there. Okay, there you go. Good to have you. Let me ask you, step back for a second. I mean, the Prime Minister gave some remarks, a videotape remarks that seemed pretty clear of why they did this, to replenish. It seemed like they struck, as General Norkin said, the military had achieved really most of its objective, or a lot of its objectives. Israel needs to replenish. They need to focus on Iran. When I say replenish, I mean replenish the ammunition. He made an explicit reference. There's also, you have reservists that have been fighting in Gaza and now in Lebanon. It's the people, the Israeli, there needs to be some rest in the society a little bit. I'll deal with some of the criticism in a second, but why do you think Israel did what it did with this? Why did it agree to this ceasefire now?
I think that the issues which are relating to the ability to continue the war, munition and exhausting units, mainly reserve unit, are in active duty in the last 14 months, more than 200 averagely 200 days in active service. It's impossible to continue with that. If there is a need to save Israel, of course, everyone will come, but we have to understand the limitations of reserve forces to fight for a long time after a year of war in Gaza. I think that it is connected to the empty storages after a year of war in Gaza. And I think that the whole issue of Iran is very important for us and for the Prime Minister, and the ability to focus on Iran in the next future is very important. That was the strategy from the beginning, that Israel is not opening two fronts. This is why in the first week, the Prime Minister didn't agree to attack Hezbollah in a way that might lead to a war in Lebanon, and that was why the whole war in Lebanon was postponed to the end of the first stage in Gaza. After dismantling Hamas, it was easier to decide to go into Lebanon. And I think that today we need more forces, or we need the forces in Gaza to continue the operation against the Hamas. And if we can evacuate and release the most of the reserve units that are serving so long time, it's very important to the Israeli economy. It's very important to the people. So replenish here is both it hardware and software. It's the ability of people to go back to their homes and to the back to the economy, and building the Israeli capability. And remember, there are some issues which hadn't been, some elements which hadn't been transferred by the Americans to Israel because of the half boycott that was announced, or not announced, but practically is there. I read that immediately after the agreement, the Americans are signing another agreement of $680 million weapon systems to Israel, many munition probably, and so on and so forth. All of that together, I think all of them worked for the ceasefire. And there was element which is very important from the American point of view, is that we are doing it now in an interregnum between the two presidents, and both presidents praised one was part of the agreement and one praised it beforehand. And for us, it's very important that it will be a bipartisan agreement, because the agreement itself is not so important from the Israeli point of view. The side letter is much more important than the agreement. The agreement are the red lines that should not be violated by the other side, but what gives Israel the ability to react and to enforce it is the side letter agreed between Israel and the United States of America, which give us the freedom to act if the other side violate the agreement. So the fact that this side letter was signed by President Biden and the whole process was encouraged by the incoming president, it means for us a lot, because it will be easier in the future when we will have problems, and probably will be problems relating to the implementation of the agreement. But I want to emphasize again, from the Israeli point of view, the agreement is less important than the ability to enforce it. And the ability to enforce it is part of the side letter which was agreed between us and the United States of America.
Yeah, I want to, on the weapons, and I know we'll talk about this with General Ayish in a couple of minutes, but on the weapons issue, I just want to point out, and to those in the audience, my colleague Blaise Mishtal and I had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last week where we put forth something that hadn't been reported before, that the slowing, the blocking, or the delaying of delivery of weapons by the Biden administration in Israel was far more extensive than had been reported. A lot of focus was just on 2,000-pound bombs, but actually there are other ammunition, 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, JDAMs, these kits that make dumb bombs more precise, among other things, 10 shells and so on, that were being slowed or blocked. And it sent to me, General Amidror, that Prime Minister Netanyahu was kind of referring to these weapons when he talked about one of the reasons why they had to do this ceasefire.
What is the question?
I just want to know if you agree with that had an impact.
No, I said that no question that the whole issue of weapon system in our storages is part of part of a motivation to have the ceasefire. Now, from my point of view, it is more important that we will have and should focus on Iran and be better prepared for the next stage, which we don't know when will occur. The Iranians are declaring again and again they still thinking about retaliation. If that happens, Israel reaction should be much more stronger than in the past, and for that we need time. We need to build our capabilities, mainly the weapons, the munition, and so on. And by releasing the Air Force and the intelligence from mainly the Air Force from Lebanon, it will be easier to be better prepared for Iran. And by the way, if you look at it, you see that this is the stamp on the fact that Iran lost its ability to use the ring of fire. Hamas is not relevant anymore. It's not relevant as a threat to Israel. We want it not to be relevant as a threat inside the Gaza Strip, and this is another stage that we are working on now. Hezbollah is still a strong organization, but in a level of capacities, and after the experience that we had in the last 3-4 months, it cannot be used anymore by Iran to deter Israel. We know how to deal with Iran. They cannot think or threat that if Israel does that and that and that, the Iranians will use the proxies. They don't have proxies now. The only proxies that which remain are the Houthis in Yemen and some Shiite militias in Iraq. And we should make clear for Iraq that they will pay high price for that. And then it will be reduced as well. So in a way, it's a different relations between us and Iran. Iran had an idea of taking the proxies, building the proxies capabilities to have a ring of fire around Israel, and that will crumble Israel by the proxies. Now it is a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran, and the proxies cannot help Iran. They are not deterring Israel, and they cannot make any harm to Israel. So it's a different situation, and we have to use it. With the new administration, I hope that we will have also the support of the United States of America, because we need it. But we have to prepare ourselves for another stage in the war between us, the direct war between us and Iran, not because we will, even if we don't initiate anything, it's because the Iranians are saying, we still considering how to retaliate.
Yeah. And then there's the issue, General Amidror, and one more question to you is, I mean, just to clarify, when we say Iran, and the Prime Minister Netanyahu mentioned Iran, I think it was the first item he mentioned, and he said, enough said. I assume he's referring to the nuclear facilities. The fact that in the last Israeli retaliation for the previous Iranian strike in early October, and then the Iranian-Israeli retaliation in late October, Israel had taken out, it pretty much, as you referred to, cleared out these S-300s, and that the airspace for Iran is far less threatening to Israeli planes right now. And I assume that's when we're saying, when you're talking about Iran, it's not just to prepare for a possible new strike by Iran of ballistic missiles, but it's referring to this issue, the opportunity that is afforded by the destruction or the severe degrading of these proxies, plus what Israel accomplished in late October and to deal with the escalating nuclear program of Iran. Is that right?
I think that from the practical point of view, being ready for another attack on Iran, the question which target exactly, if that include A or B or C, this is a decision that can be taken at the last minute. The whole preparation for such an operation is not something that you can make at the last minute. For that, you need time and to be better prepared. And for sure, the Iranians learned what we did in the first strike, and they will be better prepared to defend themselves. So we should do whatever we can to make all the efforts that if that will be needed, we will be ready.
Okay, let me go to General Ayish, and I appreciate your patience.
By the way, I want to mention something which was not mentioned up till now. This is the success of Israel to separate Hezbollah from Hamas. Right. During the whole war with the Hezbollah from the second day of the war, Nasrallah and then everyone in Hezbollah said, we are fighting for the Palestinians and we will not stop the war before it will be ended in Gaza. And what we see here is because of the big blow and the huge success of the IDF, Hezbollah was forced to give up this promise to Hamas. How the fact that Hamas is now a standalone remnants of Hamas in Gaza enclave, I don't know. It's a good question with no answer. How the pressure will be shown in their actions in the future, but it is a huge success from the Israeli point of view to separate the two groups and to have in a position to deal with one of them when the other one is sitting on his hands and doing nothing.
Actually, one of your themes, General Amidror, if I recall, since our first webinar that we did with you all, I guess on October 9th, 2 days after October 7th of last year, is the importance for Israel as best as possible to deal with each threat sequentially as opposed to...
Yeah, I was the advocate of not attacking in Lebanon because I thought that with our capacities, there was all the German general who said the main effort is never too strong. Mm-hmm. Whatever you can put in the main effort that you do, the main front that you do it as strong as possible. And that I thought that it is a wise decision not to open new front in Lebanon. And as you remember, I told you all the time that Hezbollah is 10 times stronger than Hamas, but Israel is really 20 times better for war in Lebanon than and you can see the results.
All right, so Israel first dealt with Hamas, and now Hezbollah, and now is focused on Iran. General Ayish, thanks for your patience. So let me ask you more about this, this issue of the weapons and the UN. There have been, I read here, and we have a number of American media organs on this webinar, so perhaps one or some of them will report further on this issue. But there's been some reporting, whether it's true or not, I don't know, that the ceasefire partly came about, and I think Senator Cruz might have mentioned this in a tweet, if I'm not mistaken, that the Biden administration had actually threatened Israel that if they didn't agree to a ceasefire, there'd be, I don't know if the word embargo has been used or more curtailed.
And also he mentioned UN Security Council resolution.
Right. Exactly. What is it? Do you have anything to say on that? Do you know if that's true or not? Or
okay, thank you for having me. There is a lot to say, but I will also draw the attention of our audience to what Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday, and he said it very clearly. One of the reasons was the delay of the munitions. Now, you have mentioned some of the munitions, and we know that we are talking about 12 major items that were delayed. Most of them are munitions, but not only. And we know that by that, the US administration have mounted a severe pressure on Israel. And after we have heard the prime minister yesterday, we know that was one of the major issues that he considered and led to that ceasefire. Having said that, I'd like, as I'm doing always, to remember what was the strategic goal of this campaign in the north, and it was to restore security for the civilians to be back to their villages. Having said that, the Israeli prime minister didn't call yet the Israeli citizens to be back to their villages. And it led me to mention three elements that are really important here. One, that was mentioned by General Norkin, what was achieved. And we know that in terms of military leadership, political leadership, accurate capabilities and heavy capabilities, Hezbollah has suffered a severe blow, I would say crippled. And it's not only that, we don't have the time. Basically, what they have built for almost 16 years, very close to the Israeli border, as the raid threat, the ability to storm our villages and to surprise us in the model of October 7th was removed by the IDF. And I think that together with the other achievements regarding the rockets and missiles for the medium and the short range, the achievement is very significant, and soon it will allow the Israeli citizens back to their villages. And I assume that it is very much related to the 60 days that we are going to complete really the clearance of that security zone up to the Litani, and make sure that the right forces, as General Defrin have mentioned, are deployed in the southern part of Lebanon. But this is only one element. Second element was mentioned in Gaza, and basically it was shattered. It's Hamas. And together with what the Air Force have achieved in Iran, we are in one of the best strategic positions nowadays. In terms of there is no ring of fire, there is no threat by a significant threat by proxies that can be ignited by Iran on one hand. The air defense capabilities of Iran was degraded significantly by the Air Force eliminating the S-300. And one can ask, okay, if this is the strategic situation, how come we are not doing anything? And it brings me back to your question. It's the embargo and the limitations on munitions and some other items. And in that sense, I think we have to understand how heavy, how important the gravity of this type of decision on the IDF and on the strategic divisions. And I would encourage everyone to go to the Wall Street Journal to read your publication about those 12 items and to understand that it doesn't matter if it is banned or delayed, the impact is a very severe one.
Yeah. What about the if you General Ayish, or by the way, just on that last issue, does any of you have anything to say? Or there were reports about further restrictions of weapons that were threatened by the Biden administration, or about something that could be done against Israel in the UN Security Council? I mean, there have been some reports, admittedly, I've seen this more in, let's say, right of center publications, criticizing the administration, but nobody.
Mike, as someone who have experienced it also in 2014 as the defense attaché, there are many creative, let's say, ways of the administration to send a signal, a clear message. It could be delayed, it could be banned, it could be lost in the bureaucracy. It could be a lot of things. It's all about policy, and the other way around. When the administration want to expedite stuff, as they did at the beginning of the war, and General Defrin can elaborate on that, they can do an amazing, remarkable, good job, as they did in the first few months of this campaign.
Okay. I'll just ask one more time, and I appreciate what you just said, General Ayish. Just for the others, General Norkin, General Defrin, General Amidror, do you have anything to say about whether this might be true, that the administration, pressured Israel about something that could be done and that they could do something in the UN or with further curtailment of weapons? Do any of you have anything to say about that, whether that's true or not?
I'll use one announcement by the Prime Minister. I think the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu mentioned Iran as the major issue, and the fact that he mentioned the munitions that are going to be sold soon, that's exactly what he said yesterday night. He said that it is a problem, there is a delay, and it's going to be sold soon. I think everything is very much connected here. I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, it's okay. We waited too long to ask you anything, General Ayish. General Amidror, it seemed like you were about to say something.
I think that with all due respect to all these problems with the United States of America, the main issue after the signing the agreement is the ability of Israel to keep the freedom to react and the commitment of the United States of America to let Israel to do it. If that should be tested, and it is very important for the implementation of the agreement that whenever Israel will have the intelligence that based on Israel will react, that we will get the backing of the United States of America, because for us it is essential. It's, as I said, it's the most important part of the agreement, the ability to prevent Hezbollah from bringing weapon systems from the outside, building it in Lebanon, going down to the South Lebanon, all these events in which we need to react immediately because there is no time to consult or to advise the international committee which is running the agreement, and then Israel will get the backing of the United States of America and the support of the United States of America, because this is crucial from our point of view for the implementation of the agreement.
Mike, of course, what General Amidror mentioned is the most important thing, but it's not just the freedom of action for Israel. It's also the command and control center that the American forces are supposed to build in Lebanon and to support Israel with real-time data, so we can change intelligence and data between us. And of course, by that they can control and post the Lebanon activities, and they're supposed to support Lebanon forces with better intelligence. So it's not just at the policy level; it's also at the tactical, operational level.
Effie, let me ask you this: and I'm pulling from somebody's question on the webinar who typed it in evidence, but it's a very good question. Look, General Amidror pointed out that, I mean, this is clearly what Israel has inflicted after Israel's, awful what happened on October 7th last year. They turned the tables on the Iranians. They've, as General Amidror laid out with the proxies, and now what the Israel's done to Iran's airspace. How does Hezbollah spinning this? I mean, they've, as General Amidror pointed out, Nasrallah, who was the commander, who may not rest in peace, I hope, had said
not yet. The funeral is after the ceasefire.
Right, but that's right. Oh, that they haven't had a funeral. That's right. So he said he would keep, as he initiated his military action against Israel on October 8th of last year, which obviously turned out to be a huge miscalculation for him and the organization. He said he would keep that up until there was a ceasefire in Gaza. Now, they've agreed to a ceasefire, and without there being a ceasefire yet in Gaza. So how does Hezbollah portraying this, the ceasefire? Do you know?
First, as we speak now, there is published in Lebanon that approximately now, and it's not the end of the counting, they are counting about 4,000 Hezbollah dead operators. So it's a big number. You see, they cannot hide their failure. And the second thing is that they are going through, I would say, even hell in Lebanon. There is a lot of criticism from the public opinion, the Christian community, the Sunni community. The Maronite Patriarch is talking against them. Media people are speaking out loud against them. So and they didn't before the war started, or before the pager thing, or before Nasrallah died, because they were afraid of that. Hezbollah is in a different situation now. Now, of course, they are declaring now today for the first time a guy named I forgot his name. He was the head of the international cooperation of Hezbollah. Wafik Safa, that's his name. Wafik is the senior person. I think he's the only one left there. He apparently survived an assassination attempt by the Israeli Air Force. When I was in Washington, we talked about that. He came out half smiling today. He's the only one left from the senior leadership there. So they cannot hide it anymore. You see the declarations coming from the supreme leader of Iran about Israel failure and Israel losing Lebanon and not achieving its goals. But all, declarations, hot air in a big balloon, nothing serious. We have to remember, they will not give up. They will not give up. It may take them time. They will try to build Hezbollah again. They will try to entrench again. They still have their capacities, although they were damaged severely. But they will try to do their best to not lose their grip on Lebanon. And that's the main thing. When General Amidror mentioned implementing ourselves, this is what he's talking about. We cannot allow it happening, neither us nor the international community.
Let me pick up on that last point, important point, because obviously the Iranians, they know they've suffered a huge defeat, and they're going to keep trying to rearm Hezbollah, and Israel needs to try to prevent that. And the pathway had been, I guess, among others, was obviously on the ground through Syria. Could any of you address how Israel is going forward, and do they need other partners to help them try to obstruct and prevent Iran from rearming Hezbollah in this current going forward? General Ayish, I guess it seems like you want to.
Iran already promised Hezbollah $2.8 billion to help him to rebuild itself. The pictures that are coming from the southern part of Lebanon were, initiated by Hezbollah. You can see pictures of people trying to go back to their villages, and they are standing with the yellow flag on the rebels. Having said that, they know that they have suffered a severe blow. If you would go to social media, you would see that one of the strong messages compared to the 2006 Lebanon war is the sign of the V with the crippled fingers this time. It's a very, very strong, very powerful message coming from the population inside Lebanon criticizing Hezbollah. So on one hand, they are trying to spin it, and that's what they were trying to start doing this morning by sending convoys to the villages. That's why it was so important for the IDF really to stop the Hezbollah operatives, to arrest them, as General Norkin just said. And on the other hand, then you see the results of the infrastructure and the rebels. The picture is very clear, especially due to the fact that you don't see anyone from the traditional leadership. There are no faces, to be there at the front speaking on behalf of Hezbollah to exclude that one Safa. So I think the situation in that sense is very clear. However, it is something limited in time, because the Iranians will inject these billions of dollars as they did in the past, and it will be a matter of time. And everything here is subjected to time.
General Amidror, let me ask you some. Look, it was reported, and that Ron Dermer Minister of Strategic Affairs, close confidant Netanyahu, and perhaps most importantly, a former distinguished fellow at JINSA. Before he came to the United States the other week, met with President Trump and U.S. officials in Washington. He also went to Moscow. How do you think the Russians are looking at how this is going on? There's always been, obviously the relationship between the Russians and the Iranians have gotten particularly closer in the last few years with the Ukraine war. It always seemed like with Syria, they need the Iranians and Hezbollah to help Assad, but they really don't want Iran to have too much influence in Syria. How do you think the Russians are looking at what's been going on lately in this area?
I think that we cannot make we cannot succeed to destroy the relations between Russia and Iran, because the relations are needed by both sides, and because of the pressure on the Russians in Ukraine, they need the Iranians probably more than the Iranians need them at the moment. In Syria, it is a different situation, because for the Russians, what is very important is to secure Assad in Damascus, and for them, the stability of the regime in Damascus is the main target of their operations in Syria. And they understand that the situation is different now, because with weaker Hezbollah, immediately Assad is weaker, because he needs Hezbollah to fight for him in Syria. He needs Hezbollah to back him in Syria when the opposition try to fight against him, and so on and so forth. So they understand that now when Hezbollah is weaker, immediately the result is clear in Damascus. And I think that if we succeed to build a situation in which it will be clear in Moscow and in Damascus that we might endanger the abilities of Assad in Damascus, both the Syrians and the Russians will do whatever they can to secure the regime in Damascus, and that might work against the interest of Iran in some areas.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but 2 or 3 months ago, we succeeded to blow a very important project of Syria, not far from the border with Lebanon, in which it's a facility in which they produce sophisticated missiles and so on. And by ground forces, we went in, destroying everything. For all practical purposes, this place cannot contribute anymore to the building the weapon systems for the Hezbollah and for the Syrians. It was dual use by both.
Underground.
Under the ground, deep under the ground, deep under the ground. I think that it is important for itself to take this capability out of the scene, out of the equation. But I think that it is more important, or not less important, as a signal to Assad. Guy, be careful. If you continue to support Hezbollah, you are endangering your own assets. And if that will be well understood through the operations of the IDF by the Syrians, by Assad, it will be also understood by the Russians, and how that will influence their attitude towards the price that the Syrians are paying for helping Iran. It's a good beginning for dialogue between us and the Russians. And if you ask me why Ron was there, it's basically to make the Russians understand that they are endangering, that Hamas is endangering the ability of Assad to survive. And that is very important for the Russians. They don't care about Hezbollah. Probably if we will kill all of them, no one will cry in Moscow.
Well, I'll just say one thing that maybe to conclude. One thing that struck me listening to Amos Hochstein today, and he spoke well, was that he mentioned up front, to his credit, that there'd been new leverage that had been created in recent months because of Israeli military successes. I think it's kind of an interesting moment on U.S. foreign policy in a way. It can't be reiterated enough that the administration was for ceasefire in late September. I remember being here at a conference in early September here in Washington, where Amos Hochstein talked about basically diplomacy uber alles. Keep trying to get that ceasefire in Lebanon, because otherwise the alternative is worse. And it seemed to me the administration now, of course, is taking credit, and I give them credit for working on the ceasefire, of course. But I hope this was a teaching moment for many here in the United States about the importance of leverage that could be gained from military success, winning, and that's the way it seems to me to bring about.
I think that they can, rightly so, they can take the credibility for the process of the diplomacy. We can take the credit for having the agreement.
Yes.
And I don't want to speak about all the mistakes that the Americans did during the war. Think about going with ground forces into Gaza, think about Rafah, think about the operation in Lebanon, earlier ceasefires, and so on and so forth. I think that if someone in Washington will be smart enough to take all these events and to have lessons from all this turning point in which the Americans had a view about how should we act and what happened in the real world and how it influenced the results of the war. And America can learn a lot about that, because here the lesson is not the Americans need boots on the ground, not at all. Is that if you support your ally, and it is a reliable one, you can achieve much more than if you try to stop him. And for that, you have to have kind of a trust between the two sides, and ability to have a dialogue, but to try to stop an ally like Israel, in many cases, it's a mistake and not an achievement.
I think that's an excellent way to end this discussion, exactly on time. I want to thank our distinguished panelists. JINSA is very lucky and honored to have so many superb Israeli retired generals, and to have the General Defrin, who's a retiring active IDF general, involved with us, just like we have some really excellent retired American generals. So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. I want to thank the audience for joining us today, the day before Thanksgiving. I wish everybody, and including those in Israel, if they're celebrating this, which has always been my most favorite holiday, the holiday of Thanksgiving. I wish everybody safe travels and an enjoyable Thanksgiving with your family and loved ones. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanksgiving.
Good evening.